Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's Aces High here, and today I'm bringing you guys another video that we're going to watch before we get into our whole Julius Caesar Roman series, Yesterday we watched one that was recommended by LightX7, one of my first ever subscribers, and seriously a loyal sub. They're awesome. Always there to answer my questions, always sticking around, super positive. Can't thank you enough. Seriously, I love you. That being said, this is a second one that they also recommended that I watch before we move into the series, and I trust them, so we're going to go for it. This one is called Marian Reforms and Their Military Effects. It's another video by Kings and Generals. We've watched a few of their videos before. They're not bad. I really do like them. They're an awesome channel. And I have a link down in the description if you guys want to go check them out. That being said, I have no idea what this one's about. Something about Rome, and I guess Marian Reforms and Their Military Effects, as the title puts it, or Marian. That being said, help me out. Hit that sub button. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs because I don't know. I feel like it'll be a solid, milestone. I want to see how far I can take this. I'm having a lot of fun. I hope you guys are too. I try to listen to you, and I mean, hell, I post videos every day. Not everybody does that. Anyway, that being said, I'm going to sit back. I'm going to shut up, and let's get going.
In the late 2nd century BC, Rome had defeated and subjugated Greece and Macedonia, wiped Carthage from existence, and had delivered the Seleucid Empire a devastating blow. Its fortunes seemed to be ever increasing, but problems were growing slowly. The stress of ever-increasing warfare and wealth division in their society was threatening to tear the Republic apart. On top of this, the militia army of the earlier Republic was stagnating and becoming inadequate for facing new enemies due to a lack of manpower. Soon a threat from the north would emerge that would necessitate the complete overhaul of the Roman military into what was essentially the first Roman imperial army.
Is that the Gauls that are coming from the north? They talked about that in yesterday's video.
Welcome to our video on the Marian Reforms of the late Republic. In 113 BC, a roaming army of Germanic warriors crossed Rome's border on the Danube, driven by unlivable climate conditions in their homeland. For the next few years, they rampaged around Roman territory and defeated a few Roman armies. In 105 BC, they crushed an army of 80,000 legionaries at Arausio, after which the situation became critical. The Roman people were terrified and expected the Germanic hordes at the gates of Rome at any time. It seemed as though the Republic might fall until one man returned to take command, Gaius Marius. He had just finished the Jugurthine War against the Numidians and was elected consul in absentia during the year 105 BC.
I wonder how popular the name Gaius is, because the video we watched yesterday, that was Julius Caesar's first name too. It was Gaius Julius Caesar. And again, I thought that Caesar was a title. I know a lot of you have been giving me comments, and as soon as I'm done filming this, I'm actually going to go and read those. And I'm sure somebody's already told me whether it's a title or not, so sorry to be repeating that. Definitely won't happen again. I'll know the answer by tomorrow, I promise. But yeah, I just wonder how popular that name is.
Upon his return to Rome, he began to drastically alter the military in order to combat this new threat. His reforms would have a wide-ranging impact, both on the legions and the state of Rome. It is worth noting that not all of his changes were novel. Generals before Marius had paved the way for them, and had partaken in various different tactics before this time, such as the reduction of the baggage train. Marius, however, both created new methods for the Roman army and permanently instituted the effective methods of the other commanders who had come before him. Until Marius's reforms, there was a property requirement to join the citizen militia legions.
Really?
This limited the number of legionaries, as they had to supply their own arms and armor and had to own property valued at 3,500 sesterces or more.
So if you were poor, you couldn't be in the army. You had to have some property and you had to have enough money to buy all your own stuff to fight for your country.
Perhaps the most important reform implemented by Marius was to ignore this property requirement. He allowed the Capitae Censi of Rome to join the legions, those counted by the head. The landless poor were now among the ranks of those who could join the legions, even though they had no property. On top of, and because of this, Marius arranged for the state to supply the legions with their arms and armour, offered poor recruits the chance to gain a professional soldier's pay, and the chance to gain loot and plunder on campaign. The masses, with little hope of gaining status in any other occupation, flocked to Marius's new legions. In contrast to the earlier Roman policy in which the citizen army would disband after a campaign, recruits were now enlisted for a term of 16 years. This created a standing Roman army for the first time, and drastically increased its quality.
16 years is a hell of a sign-up, but I mean, if you have nothing else going for you, you're bottom class, this is your way out, I guess, of poverty, it only makes sense. Just make that your career, you know?
On the other hand, the balanced cross-sectional army of the Roman people at war was destroyed, in favour of an army made up mainly of the landless poor, the proletarii. This would eventually have grave consequences for the Republic, as the poor soldiers became loyal to their generals rather than to the Roman state. While this seems like a landmark change, it is also possible that these reforms were just the final stage in an already occurring gradual decline in property requirements for the Roman army. The organisation of the various Roman units was also completely changed in these reforms. The early maniple system was last recorded being used in the Battle of Muthul in the Jugurthine War of 109 BC. As the system had become obsolete and needed replacement, the Romans did away with it without sentimentality. By 104 BC, Marius had discarded 4 of the 5 legionary standards which had been used for command and control purposes: the Minotaur, Horse, Boar, and Wolf. Only one remained, the Aquila or Eagle. This is when the Roman Eagle standard became the emblem of the Roman legions. To replace the maniples as the primary tactical unit of the Roman military, the cohort was adopted. Compared to the 120-strong maniple, a standard Republican cohort was a larger 600-strong unit, comprised of 6 centuries. 480 of these men were legionaries, whereas the other 120 were non-combatants, either servants, slaves, or tactical support personnel such as
What makes up
engineer.
What makes up a legion? You know, because they said they're legionaries. Are those people that make up a legion? Is that what that is? Like that definition? Because I mean, what is that a classification? You know?
Is. The component unit, the Roman century, was a 100-strong unit commanded by a centurion. In this unit, 80 men served as legionaries and 20 men were non-combatants. There was also no designated military commander of a cohort itself, and it is widely believed that either the most senior centurion took command, or the 6 centurions commanded together as a council. The smallest and most personal unit in this system was the contubernium. This was comprised of 10 men commanded by an officer called a decanus. 8 men were legionaries and only 2 were non-combatants. 10 contubernia made up a century and 6 centuries made up a cohort. It was 10 of these new military divisions which made up a new Roman legion of around 6,000 men, with 4,800 legionaries and 1,200 non-combatants. The abolition of the manipular system also abolished the 3 distinct lines of infantry of the mid-republic. The hastati, principes and triarii were removed, and instead 3 lines of infantry equipped similarly to the earlier principes were adopted. The form of triplex acies used in the Marian legion was different to the one implemented prior to it. Cohorts were a solid unit with only small gaps in between them, compared to the previous maniple system with larger gaps. This, along with the increased depth of the new cohorts, reduced the tendency of the soldiers to panic and flee, as they would feel they had more support and were safe. The legions were now on their way to becoming the force of popular imagination, a homogeneous force of heavy infantry armed with the gladius as their primary weapon and a dagger called the pugio as a sidearm. These new uniform warriors were all named legionarii. Their equipment mostly remained the same, but some tweaks were made. The iron shank of the pilum javelin was previously attached to the wooden shaft by 2 nails. However, Marius replaced one of the nails with a less sturdy wooden peg. On impact, the peg would snap, rendering the pilum useless and bending the shank at a right angle, making the enemy even more encumbered by the impaling of their shields. As for protection, the legionarii wore a helmet, body armor and greaves. Their main protection, however, was still the large scutum shield, which covered the soldier from shoulder to shin. A legionary would also bash and batter opponents with this shield, despite its weight. In this way, it could be just as offensive as his blade. The 1,200 non-combat attendants may seem like a lot of support personnel at first glance, but it is important to remember the key role of logistics in warfare. Without food, animals, fuel and maintenance, an army could not function. The reforms did not ignore logistics, and the creation of Marius's mules was a perfect example of this. Under Marius, legionaries began to carry all of their equipment themselves, rather than relying on a cumbersome baggage train. This had many positive impacts for the operations of the army. The soldiers themselves became conditioned by their heavy load, with the physical training increasing their endurance during combat. In addition, the soldiers carrying their own entrenching equipment allowed for the rapid construction of fortifications, camps, and earthworks. Finally, the lack of a massive baggage train also allowed the legions to move extremely quickly compared to their prior speed.
Okay.
The only drawbacks were the complaints from the legionaries about their new heavy workload.
That kind of makes sense. Same type of thing as like a core system in not entirely. They're very different, but in with like Napoleon and everything, that was one of the pros is you're able to move very quickly because you don't have this big supply train or supply wagons coming up.
Becoming referred to as Marius's mules, named so for their heavy packs. As the Republic progressed, the unpopular nature of horsemanship in Roman society resulted in a severe deficit of cavalry. While the Romans were still fighting smaller foes on their peninsula, the smaller cavalry wing they possessed was adequate. However, as they began to come into contact with larger external foes with fearsome cavalry contingents such as the Germans or Gauls, it resulted in serious setbacks despite their lethal heavy infantry. After the Battle of Zama, Roman armies were almost always accompanied by a significant force of non-Italian cavalry. This became even more pronounced in the time of Marius, as he disbanded most of the Roman and Italian cavalry, replacing it entirely with native allied cavalry, who were often better trained and had specialized equipment from their homeland.
That makes sense. Just kind of stick with what you're best at. If they're not good at their cavalry, maybe you can fix it in time, but for now, take somebody who is good at that job.
In his later conquest of Gaul, Julius Caesar relied heavily on the famous Numidian cavalry, and later his Gallic and Germanic heavy cavalry for his victories in that war. Indeed, the final cavalry charge that gained victory at the Battle of Alesia in 52 BC was made by Caesar's German cavalry. Allied light infantry auxilia were also used in place of the earlier velites, which Marius disbanded. Various native peoples from around and outside the empire were used, including but not limited to German light infantry, Balearic slingers, Cretan archers, and light Spanish melee troops. Using his newly honed legions and tactics, Marius was successful, and the Cimbri were defeated once and for all at the battles of Aquae Sextiae and Vercellae in 102 and 101 BC. The reforms had their desired effect on the army, making it a standing professional force which did not disband after campaigning, allowing it to retain its experience. In the coming centuries, this would set the stage for the development of the most efficient and deadly army of the ancient world.
Yeah.
Despite the benefits, such massive changes would not go without consequence for the Republic.
I mean, that army looks terrifying. I understand this is just a game. I think somebody told me once before this was from Rome 2 Total War, Rome Total War 2 or something like that. I've seen the game. I've never played it, but still, I mean, an army that size would just be terrifying, especially when they're all moving in sync. They all have their high endurance. They're trained together. They're moving together. You know, it just that'd be terrifying.
Because the general of a Roman army was responsible for the payment of their soldiers in both land and coin, the armies would often be more loyal to their general than to the Roman state. This was exacerbated as the majority of legionaries were now the poorer proletarii who desired payment and advancement. As a result, power began to shift from the senatorial class to the commanders in the field. From Marius to Sulla, Pompey, and finally to Caesar, this would cause a series of power struggles.
He called him Pompey too. Is it Pompey? I always thought the general's name Pompey. Like the mountain.
Between various strongmen of Rome, which led to a series of civil wars. Eventually, the strain of these immense social changes would result in the rise of the imperial system under Augustus. The sponsor of this video...
Okay, that looks like it's about it. Yeah. No, I'm glad you had me watch that. It really broke down a lot of questions I had about their military, about their setup, about their training. It's an interesting system. It's kind of like a core system, you know, where I mean, sure, it's still a legion, it's 6,000 men, but it's they got their logistics. They're bringing all their stuff with them, their supplies with them. It's just it's an interesting setup, and I think it's going to work out really, really well. That being said, I am so excited to be able to get into this next series, and I think tomorrow we're probably going to be starting it. But stick with me. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Till next time, this is Aces High. Love y'all. I'm out.